You know, how can anyone in America trust anything the administration says at this point? They misled the American people about the Affordable Care Act. They misled the American people about the attacks in Benghazi and the motivation behind those attacks. They misled the American people about the IRS's targeting of conservative groups. And now we see they've misled the American people over the Iran deal, as evidenced by Ben Rhodes' comments in the New York Times article this week, confirmed in the Washington Post article, where the administration pushed a certain narrative, misled not only the American people, misled the media, who in turn misled the American people. And even White House spokesman Josh Earnest couldn't find the words to deny the administration misled you, America. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reiterate my call for the State Department to provide to this committee and the Committee on Homeland Security a white paper referenced in their memo as they implemented the Visa Waiver Program Improvement and Terrorist Travel Prevention Act, which they're using to circumvent the will of Congress and the letter of the law to allow foreigners that have traveled to Iran and other areas of the world that host terrorists to have access to the Visa Waiver Program. There was a white paper reference in their justification. We asked Secretary Kerry in this committee. We've sent letters to the Department of State. We've asked the Department of State officials and Homeland Security Committee for a copy of that white paper that they used to circumvent Congress and to circumvent the law. So I reiterate my call for that. Mr. Zaret, how much money would Iran have access to with this Iranian deal, unfrozen assets? Let's just talk about unfrozen assets for just a second.
Yeah, Congressman, the estimates have been anywhere between $70 billion to $150 billion, and obviously we've heard—
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And I've estimated, and I've said this before in testimony, that there are likely assets that are unaccounted for. Those are known assets, largely central bank reserves.
And expanding Iranian economy with sanctions being lifted, their ability to sell their oil in the open market, not the black market, would enhance that number somewhat.
Absolutely, and that does not include the growth of their economy and
exactly. So let me read Ayatollah Khamenei's words after this deal was struck. Whether the deal is approved or disapproved, we will never stop supporting our friends in the region and the people of Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, and Lebanon. Basically, Hezbollah, Hamas. Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, financially and with material support. And with his own words, they're going to continue to support those terrorists. His own words. With $150 billion and an expanding economy, that's a heck of a lot of money to support terrorism. Should the free world be concerned?
Absolutely, and it's precisely why we shouldn't be giving Iran any special exemptions or special access to the dollar, be it onshore or offshore. I mean, we should expect, and we know, not only from what the Iranians have said, but also what the terrorists have said. You know, Hassan Nasrallah himself said that we expect continued and expanded support from the Iranians. And so we know that's going to happen. We know that there's an increased risk, a very real risk of flows of millions, if not billions of dollars to Iranian proxies. We've seen with the interdiction of shipments to Yemen by international naval forces, including U.S. forces, that they're trying to send arms into Yemen to the Houthi rebels, acting as their proxies. So we know this is happening.
They're active in Iraq. They're active
it's not just what they say. We
Exactly.
see it on the ground. We understand it. We hear what their allies say. And so it's a real risk.
Yeah, let me reclaim my time. I chair the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee. And we've had hearings and we've been very vocal about the presence of Hezbollah in the Western Hemisphere. General Kelly, former commander of Southcom, has testified about his concern of Iran's activity in the Western Hemisphere. Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. Iran's active here. Cultural centers and areas in Latin America that don't have really strong Islamic ties or Muslim populations. We know that the tri-border region between Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil is very active in Hezbollah. If Hezbollah is in the Western Hemisphere and Iran has $150 billion to support their friends, Hezbollah and Hamas and the others that the Ayatollah himself mentioned, would reason not speak to the fact that they may support Hezbollah in the Western Hemisphere and their own activity, Iran's activity, in the Western Hemisphere that could target American interests or the interest of our friends and allies closer to home? Not the Middle East, but here in Latin America and the Western Hemisphere. Is that fair to assume?
It's absolutely fair, and it's not just in the tri-border area. It's in places like Venezuela, where there have been traditional and commercial ties between the Iranian government and the Venezuelan government.
You know,
And
Caracas, Air Tehran, Air Terra, whatever,
exactly.
the flights.
Not to mention the expansive Hezbollah network, which the U.S. Treasury and the DEA have been exposing as a global criminal enterprise in Latin America, in West Africa, which is part of this infrastructure that Iran can tap into and certainly support with financing. One other point I will just say, a friend and colleague of mine, Alberto Nisman, the Argentine prosecutor, I believe was murdered, in part because he was investigating not just the attacks from Iranian-sponsored terrorism in Buenos
92
Aires,
and 94.
but also looking at where Iran had presence in South America and in Latin America.
Right. And just for the committee's awareness, the gentleman, the Iranian that was implicated in those attacks,
Right.
was supposed to come to Colombia and may still lead a delegation to Colombia, should be arrested by Interpol. That is how close to home this is.